Well, full disclosure here on the Unnamed Fantasy Football Show. The last time I filled in for Lisa Matthews here and co-hosted the show, I have not won since, gentlemen. So let's hope
Welcome back.
things turn around here in Week 11.
Oh, man, that is probably the best stat we're going to go through today.
Started off
How long
so
ago
well.
was that?
Few weeks. I'm on a 6-game losing streak,
Oh.
Kyle.
Man. Well,
It's not funny.
hopefully we could
hilarious.
reverse that luck
Yes.
this week. You play Lisa too, don't
Yeah,
you?
actually, we exchanged emails yesterday to get prepared for today's show, and she wished me luck, and then she realized that we face one another this week, and she said, no luck.
Took it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
took it off. It doesn't count. So yeah,
Maybe
Not
you'll
doing well.
Maybe you'll double reverse jinx yourself, and now that you've been on twice, you'll go on a win streak.
that's the hope. Although since I've been on, I mean, you're still
Bad.
yeah, you're still bad. Kyle.
Here or not, I'm bad.
Not really a good way to say it, I guess.
Well, let's take a look at what happened last week here amongst us. And, there is Fantasy Rookie losing again. Just that 3-7 record is staring a hole in me, and it's just not good. But Show T the Money continues to roll, now 8-2, and Kyler the Creator is 9-1 on a 6-game winning streak. So good for Taylor and Jackson respectively, but it's just not good for the rest of us here.
Very happy for those two
Yes.
as we
insanely.
struggle. Well,
No,
you're doing good.
I'm doing
Zach.
okay. Yeah, I'm not. I can't really talk too much, but yeah, Jackson and Taylor, they definitely are on top of things and picking guys up. They've made a couple pretty good moves, and I mean, some of the boldest moves I think I've seen thus far have come from Jackson, who's 9-1. I mean, he's been rolling with Kyler since week 1. He picked up Kenyan Drake on
That's true. Yes.
3 days' notice and played him that week. I mean, he's definitely making some good moves, and if I'm taking fantasy advice, I'm probably taking it from him at this point.
Well, then does it need to be said that because they're making so many moves that they don't have enough to do during the week, that they need some extra work put on their
Maybe,
plate? Because
maybe.
apparently I have no free time whatsoever, right,
Yeah.
Kyle? Like when you're near the bottom of the standings or at the bottom, you just have no time.
That's a great excuse. Sorry, I'm working too hard that I can't pay attention to fantasy football enough. It is all about the due diligence in the season, waiver wire, figuring out playing time and touches and scheduling, like which team is playing a soft run defense. There's definitely a lot of studying. Like you can have a good draft and then still fall off if you're not on top of that. And Jackson and some of the others, and I'm sure people watching have realized if you do stay on top of it, your chances of success are way higher.
The good news, though, for your team, Kyle, is you have Lamar Jackson, and he was the top performing player last week, and that's been a good pickup for you, but it just hasn't translated into money wins on your team.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a really good fantasy player because he's really improved with his arm and he's throwing for a decent amount of yards, but clearly his mobility and his legs is the big difference. I mean, he's leading the NFL in yards per carry. He's running a bunch, which we haven't seen quarterback run this much for a long time, maybe ever. I'd have to see how many carries he's getting compared to quarterbacks in the past, but he's got Michael Vick level explosiveness in the running game, and he's coming along. He had a perfect passer rating last week, so great combination. Guy who a lot of people took late in the draft, definitely somebody I took, I think, the last 3 or 4 rounds and paid off great.
Well, let's take a look at the rest of the top performing players this past week. And you mentioned the perfect passer rating. That's the second time he's had that this season. Of course, Deshaun Watson, the opponent this week, also had a perfect passer rating. But looking at the top Amongst them, of course, Christian Kirk, almost 38 points based off his 138 yards receiving and count them 1, 2, 3 receiving touchdowns. And there's fantasy rookie all the way down to the bottom. Patrick Mahomes is back and almost getting me 40 points. But, good to see an Arizona Cardinal at the top of that list. And the unfortunate part, though, for Melanie and the AZCC Dream Team, Christian Kirk was on her bench.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
he's a guy that we saw him last year we saw him in training camp, and it's like, this guy is going to be a star. That's how I felt. And he dealt with that ankle injury and was still trying to get back into form. Now he's healthy. Kyler Murray is really excelling. So if you have Christian Kirk, don't leave him on your bench.
Yeah, and I mean, just the way that this offense keeps growing, it's going to be more or less not do you play them, but which ones do you play? Because, each week one of these guys has the opportunity to break out, and you kind of have to pick and choose and see which one it might be. Obviously, last week it was Christian Kirk, and I think he's going to be a great play moving forward.
And I think I can understand people if you didn't have him 2 weeks ago when he first came back because you weren't sure. But just watching him and even on those highlights, that ankle is fine. I mean, and he is not only running well, but he is maybe, I don't want to say running faster, but certainly getting behind defenders on a consistent basis, something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle when you talk about him because he's not known as that speed guy, but he does have what he likes to say is game speed, breakaway speed, and two of those 3 touchdown tosses, he had a good 2 or 3 yards between him and the defender chasing him.
He's a very well-rounded receiver. Like you said, he can go deep. He's also very good at running routes, and he can cut on a dime, so he can do the intermediate stuff. You can throw him bubble screens. I mean, he's going to be a guy that gets a lot of catches, gets a lot of targets. His chemistry with Kyler Murray is really good. They played college football for a season together at Texas A&M. They've known each other for a long time, and clearly Kyler Murray will look for Christian Kirk consistently, and that's a big thing too in fantasy football.
Looking at the rest of the Arizona Cardinals and what they did, certainly no one better than Christian Kirk, but Kyler Murray consistently getting fantasy football owners in that 20 to 25 range, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes not as much. Larry Fitzgerald consistent, and your guy Zane Gonzalez once again. 11 points. Watching the Monday morning show, I know he's a favorite of yours.
Yeah, I mean it's hard though. I mean, the more points that Zane gets, that means the more field goals are going through and less true. Touchdowns. Yes. So I see frustration and joy in this kind of thing, but but Zane, yeah, I mean he's been almost automatic. Knock on wood, of course, but whenever it's his time to step up and put one through the uprights, it's normally pretty
kind
good.
of a double-edged sword. You love to see that he is kicking field goals, leading the NFL in field goals, yet at the same time, you'd much rather have those trips inside the red zone or trips outside that field in touchdowns versus field goals.
Yeah, fantasy owner Zach is very excited by that, but Cardinals fan Zach would like to see 25 points from Larry and 35 from Kyler and maybe 2 or 3 from.
Well, you look just below Zane Gonzalez, and ahead of Kenyan Drake is Andy Isabella, who is a free agent, or at least he was last week. And the question is, what do Cardinal fans or what do fantasy football owners do with Andy Isabella, who had his best day as an NFL player last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And we were talking off air, Kyle, that I don't know about touchdowns per se, but he certainly will get you yards, and it's limited catches, but they are big gain catches.
Yeah, definitely a big play type of guy. To me, I think you have to watch Andy Isabella's playing time. If he's been trending upward the last few weeks, and he got, I think, 3 targets in this last game, which is probably a career high for him because the targets haven't really been there. And if he starts playing 50, 60, if he pushes towards 70% of the time, then you're talking about a real fantasy asset because he's a big play guy. You can give it to him on the jet sweeps and run the ball a little bit. You can do a lot of different things with Andy Isabella. But at this point, he's still kind of splitting time at outside receiver. So I understand the hesitation among fantasy owners because he can get you an 88-yard touchdown like he did against the Niners, or he can not get a catch in a game. So it's very boom or bust. But a guy who, as I said, continues to trend upward in playing time, and obviously that's important. And if he does become a starter at some point, then I think you seriously have to consider trying to put him in the lineup.
I believe 26 snaps against Tampa Bay, the most all season. And, of course, you referenced the touchdown toss against the San Francisco 49ers, this week's opponent, Cardinals and 49ers in Week 11. So let's discuss here as far as with the first, before we get to the running back discussion, the wide receivers, because so soon after the first meeting, are you now, hey, he got me that 88-yard touchdown the first go-around. Is he going to be a big part of the offense game plan against the 49ers this coming week?
I mean, who knows, I guess, at this point. But,
it's not who knows. As head coach Cliff Kingsbury says, we'll see.
We'll see, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, I think just like Kyle said, the biggest thing to watch is snap count. If his snap count continues to increase every week, he may end up getting more targets, more looks, and that's only going to equate to more points on the board. So I think depending on how deep your league is or, what kind of bye week issues you're dealing with now, he may not be the worst streaming option, but I still think it's kind of a little bit too early to start throwing him in there.
I think as we talked about Christian Kirk, that guy's a must-play even against a tough 49ers defense because the Cardinals are seemingly throwing it more recently. Kyler Murray's in a good groove. Most interesting guy to me is Larry Fitzgerald, where he did have a nice bounce-back game last week against Tampa, but that was an up-and-down affair, lots of throwing by both sides, lots of offense. If this game is more low-scoring, is there enough volume there for Larry Fitzgerald to have a big game? I mean, he's still a red zone target, so maybe he gets you a touchdown and that carries it. But his numbers have been up and down the last few weeks, and that's interesting from a fantasy standpoint of will he get enough targets to be a worthwhile play? Because I think Larry Fitzgerald is on that bubble flex type guy at this point where sometimes he has a nice week, sometimes he's more 3 catches for 40 yards, and right there you're kind of a borderline play. So an interesting guy for this week.
And I think it's important to note because when you think about, okay, who to start and maybe who do I leave on my bench, it's who are we playing that week? And with regards to the Cardinals taking on the 49ers, yes, a great defense against the run, but, how are they against the pass? And then can the Cardinals throw against this 49ers defense? Is Kyler Murray going to have enough time to throw? And how much do they hand the ball off to a Kenyan Drake or David Johnson? That all needs to be factored in, and we know what the Cardinals were able to do in that first meeting. They actually played better offensively against the 49ers than any other team up until that point against Monday Night Football and Seattle Seahawks. So, I think this is going to be, I don't know about a high-scoring affair like the Tampa Bay contest is, but I think the Cardinals offensively have shown so far this season, it doesn't matter who or what defense is in front of them, they'll be able to run the football and pass the football.
Yeah, and you've seen the offense kind of take on different shapes depending on our opponent. You see the run rate or you see the air raid, and it's, are Larry and Christian going to be the ones to get the points, or is it Kenyan and DJ? So it kind of depends on who the opponent is, and just like you said, with a strong San Francisco defense, maybe it is a little bit more of the dump-off passes and short passes to get the ball out of Kyler's hands fast rather than, the 68-yard touchdowns to Christian Kirk.
Now, I know the big question last week with regarding to the Cardinals offense was, okay, who starts at running back? And our answer was, well, both David Johnson and Kenyan Drake are going to start. So let's kind of look at just how much playing time and how many snaps. And certainly that is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be wondering about. You're not going to get a concrete answer, but just judging off numbers, Kenyan Drake played a lot more than David Johnson. And then what was said after Sunday's contest, Kingsbury acknowledging that, yes, Johnson was benched for performance. And Kyle, on Wednesday, he was on the practice field during open availability and was not on the injury report at all. Mm-hmm. So he is not hurt. It was performance-based on why he did not play after fumbling.
Yeah, and everybody that saw that game, I think, realizes David Johnson clearly did not have his best game, and you understand why Kenyan Drake was the guy they chose down the stretch. But also, I would hesitate to overreact from one game where this is we have a lot of recency bias where you watch one game and you put a lot of stock in that. So David Johnson has been a good player for a long time, and it is complicated now with Kenyan Drake in the fold. So Kenyan Drake maybe does get half the snaps or the majority. We'll see how it goes, but David Johnson was everybody's first-round pick, and he's got the receiving ability and the rushing ability. So that's definitely an interesting call when you've spent that kind of draft capital on a running back and you want him to lead your team, and now there's a lot of uncertainty. I think this week will be important because maybe he just bounces back and you have the two-headed monster and it's pretty clear moving forward. But if Kenyan Drake all of a sudden takes the lion's share of the snaps, then David Johnson owners, I think, are going to be panicking.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting situation moving forward. And, shout out to Felipe, who was all about not necessarily playing either of them against the Bucs. I was on the other side of that and kind of pushing people to play both of them. So, take my advice with a grain of salt this week. But, it's tough. I mean, Kenyan Drake slashed the Niners for, I think it was
162 total
162
yards.
and a touchdown. So was that kind of by surprise because he just showed up 3 days before, or, is it just that's how explosive Kenyan can be? So I don't necessarily know that I'm super comfortable playing either of them against this defense, but, it's going to be something to monitor moving forward.
Well, it is a tired defense as well. 70 minutes everyone played on Monday Night Football, and then, of course, a shortened week. The 49ers, though, they have got their own injury concerns as well, and I know fantasy football owners want to know. I mean, George Kittle, is he going to play? I know Kyle Shanahan, when he had the conference call the other day with us here, said Kittle was not going to play. And then the 49ers had to come out and say, well, he hasn't officially been ruled out. He did not play against the Seahawks on Monday, and I would be surprised, Kyle, if we did see George Kittle on the field. He had a touchdown in that first meeting, but I think the 49ers are looking more long-term versus this week and this week only.
Yeah, definitely a great tight end. He's a guy who's been a fantasy staple in the lineup for whoever has George Kittle. But, yeah, the tea leaves seem to be saying he's not going to play this week. Emmanuel Sanders, too, is an interesting one who got hurt last week, hurt his ribs. Kyle Shanahan said he's still in significant pain, and he's probably not going to do much this week in practice. Will probably be a game-time decision. So people might be waiting for those inactives, but you always worry about a guy who is hurt, even if he is active. Is his role going to be the same? Is he going to get the volume of targets? Emmanuel Sanders was great against the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. Had a really big game. Fantasy owners were happy, but at this point, I think Kittle and Sanders, if you have either of those guys, you might be looking for different options.
Matt Breida is another one, the 49ers running back, dealing with an ankle injury. He always seems to be dealing with something, but even does perform when he does get on the field. And that, you mentioned the inactives, that's something that I've been dealing with because I've got T.Y. Hilton, and he was excellent, and then all of a sudden he gets hurt. He's not practicing all the time. He's limited in practice or doesn't practice at all. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. You're on the bench. Even because, there are some players, if you're not 100%, you're still better than others at 100%. But no, I'm going to find someone that I definitely know is going to play. And sometimes it bites you and sometimes it doesn't. But that's what you have to kind of weigh, especially if, and this, as the season continues on, I think you're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, just the emotional roller coaster is too much for you with T.I. Hilton. I mean, so like I said, take my advice with a grain of salt. But this would be my hot start of the week, which I think we have a cool little graphic, maybe. But my hot start would be Deebo Samuel against the Cardinals.
I like that.
Just because of the injuries to Kittle, the injury to Sanders, you don't know who's necessarily going to play. But Deebo Samuel ended up with 8 catches on 11 targets, 112 yards last week, with both of them kind of ailing and out. So he would be kind of their next in line for targets, and I think he's probably available in quite a few leagues at this point.
And Patrick Peterson hurt his calf against the Buccaneers and left the end of the game. He did practice in a limited capacity on Wednesday, which trends well for maybe him playing, and that's something to factor in too. If what the Cardinals do with Patrick Peterson, is he shadowing one guy? Is he playing a certain side of the field? But him out there, it still can affect fantasy football because he's shut down some players in the past. And if he has a big game, you can look at guys that you're hoping can fill in for a Sanders or a Kittle. But if Peterson's on them the majority of the game, sometimes that can really hurt the wide receivers' production.
Let's turn this back to me in Fantasy Rookie here, because my dilemma is, I don't know, maybe it's not a dilemma, but based off what Jimmy Garoppolo did the first time around, he's currently on my bench. I got Patrick Mahomes and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh. Not even a question.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a dilemma.
I don't think so.
You got
either.
Mahomes, man.
Yeah, I don't think there's a question either.
No.
But for those people out there, though, I mean,
I don't even know who the Chiefs are playing and play Mahomes. It could be a snowstorm and I'd play Mahomes.
that's
Yeah.
true. But is this Jimmy Garoppolo that had the 4 touchdown passes, or is this Jimmy Garoppolo that turned it over 3 times against the Seahawks?
Yeah.
I would not be rolling with Jimmy Garoppolo right now. I mean, he did have the excellent game against the Cardinals, but the injuries on offense, how good their defense is, maybe you're looking at a more low-scoring game. I would be, if I'm a fantasy football owner, I'd look for other options.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my dilemma every week is I have Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. So it's like, luckily enough, like Deshaun Watson was on a bye, so I had to play Dak, and Dak played well. But, I think for the first 5 weeks of the season, I always picked the wrong one of the two. So I've been riding with Deshaun Watson as of late, and it's been all right for me.
Well, what are you doing this week?
Right now, it's Watson.
Watson against the Ravens defense.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You got any dilemmas here, Kyle, before we close up this edition of the Unnamed Fantasy Football Show?
I'm just dealing with some injuries too because I have Kittle and I have Breida, so just go and AJ Green looked like he was going to come back and then he got a setback. Hopefully he'll be back soon, but I'm just trying to persevere and get my 3rd win of the season at some point.
You're the ultimate 90 minutes before kickoff guy as far as, all right, who's up, who's down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I currently don't have a tight end because I have Austin Hooper who just had knee surgery.
Yes.
So I'm kind of scouring the waiver wire and market for a tight end. So if, I know you have Kittle, but that's not going to do me any good. But yeah, so that's
Jared Cook's my backup.
I
so
guess
I'm rolling with him right now.
That's my other dilemma this week would be that.
Should be a lot of fun in Week 11. Of course, the big matchup here amongst us on the Unnamed Fantasy Football Show is we've got Kyle the Creator, Jackson, who's on a 6-game winning streak, and Two Spoons, Richard, a 5-game winning streak. So the matchup to watch here in Week 11. And, of course, we'll figure out all the results after this week and join you next week to figure out what happens next. By the way, Zach, do you know when the playoffs start?
I think in a few weeks.
Few weeks?
Everyone makes the playoffs.
Oh, that's great.
That's when we're rolling into form.
Everyone makes the playoffs.
That's right.
Exciting.
I can say I'm a first-year owner, and I made the playoffs.
That's
You just got to get hot at the right time.
That's it.
All right. Appreciate everyone tuning in here. It is the Unnamed Fantasy Football Show on YouTube. Everyone have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week. Lisa Matthews will be back in this chair.